This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Carl Manchester, 2007. God and the State, by Mikhail Bakunin. Chapter 4. Credo Quod Absurdum. I believe in the absurd. I believe in it precisely and mainly because it is absurd. In the same way, many distinguished and enlightened minds in our day believe in animal magnetism, spiritualism, tipping tables, and, why go so far, believe still in Christianity, in idealism, in God. The belief of the ancient proletariat, like that of the modern, was more robust and simple, less au goût. The Christian propagandism appealed to its heart, not to its mind, to its eternal aspirations, its necessities, its sufferings, its slavery, not to its reason, which still slept and therefore could know nothing about logical contradictions and the evidence of the absurd. It was interested solely in knowing when the hour of promised deliverance would strike, when the kingdom of God would come. As for theological dogmas, it did not trouble itself about them because it understood nothing about them. The proletariat converted to Christianity constituted its growing material, but not its intellectual strength. As for the Christian dogmas, it is known that they were elaborated in a series of theological and literary works, and in the councils principally by the converted Neoplatonists of the Orient. The Greek mind had fallen so low that in the 4th century of the Christian era, the period of the First Council, the idea of a personal God, pure, eternal, absolute mind, creator and supreme master, existing outside the world, was unanimously accepted by the Church Fathers. As a logical consequence of this absolute absurdity, it then became natural and necessary to believe in the immateriality and immortality of the human soul, lodged and imprisoned in a body only partially mortal, there being in this body itself a portion which, while material, is immortal like the soul, and must be resurrected with it. We see how difficult it was, even for the Church Fathers, to conceive pure minds outside of any material form. It should be added that in general it is the character of every metaphysical and theological argument to seek to explain one absurdity by another. It was very fortunate for Christianity that it met a world of slaves. It had another piece of good luck in the invasion of the barbarians. The latter were worthy people, full of natural force and, above all, urged on by a great necessity of life and a great capacity for it. Brigands who had stood every test, capable of devastating and gobbling up anything, like their successors, the Germans of today. But they were much less systematic and pedantic than these last, much less moralistic, less learned, and on the other hand much more independent and proud, capable of science and not incapable of liberty, as are the bourgeois of modern Germany. But, in spite of all their great qualities, they were nothing but barbarians, that is, as indifferent to all questions of theology and metaphysics as the ancient slaves, a great number of whom, moreover, belonged to their race. So that, their practical repugnance once overcome, it was not difficult to convert them theoretically to Christianity. For 10 centuries Christianity, armed with the omnipotence of church and state and opposed by no competition, was able to deprave, debase, and falsify the mind of Europe. It had no competitors because outside of the church there were neither thinkers nor educated persons. It alone thought, it alone spoke and wrote, it alone taught. Though heresies arose in its bosom, they affected only the theological or practical developments of the fundamental dogma, never the dogma itself. The belief in God, pure spirit and creator of the world, and the belief in the immateriality of the soul remained untouched. This double belief became the ideal basis of the whole Occidental and Oriental civilization of Europe. It penetrated and became incarnate in all the institutions, all the details of the public and private life of all classes, and the masses as well. After that, is it surprising that this belief has lived until the present day, continuing to exercise its disastrous influence even upon select minds, such as those of Mazzini, Michelet, Quinet, and so many others. We have seen that the first attack upon it came from the renaissance of the free mind in the 15th century, which produced heroes and martyrs like Vanini, Giordano Bruno, and Galileo. Although drowned in the noise, tumult, and passions of the Reformation, it noiselessly continued its invisible work, bequeathing to the noblest minds of each generation its task of human emancipation by the destruction of the absurd, until at last, in the latter half of the 18th century, it again reappeared in broad day, boldly waving the flag of atheism and materialism. The human mind, then, one might have supposed, was at last about to deliver itself from all the divine obsessions. Not at all. The divine falsehood upon which humanity had been feeding for 18 centuries, speaking of Christianity only, was once again to show itself more powerful than human truth. No longer able to make use of the black tribe, of the ravens consecrated by the Church, of the Catholic or Protestant priests, all confidence in whom had been lost, it made use of lay priests, short-robed liars and sophists, among whom the principal roles devolved upon two fatal men, one the falsest mind, the other the most doctrinally despotic will of the last century, J. Rousseau and Robespierre. The first is the perfect type of narrowness and suspicious meanness, of exaltation without other object than his own person, of cold enthusiasm and hypocrisy at once sentimental and implacable, of the falsehood of modern idealism. He may be considered as the real creator of modern reaction. To all appearance the most democratic writer of the 18th century, he bred within himself the pitiless despotism of the statesman. He was the prophet of the doctrinaire state, as Robespierre, his worthy and faithful disciple, tried to become its high priest. Having heard the saying of Voltaire, that if God did not exist it would be necessary to invent him, J. Rousseau invented the Supreme Being, the abstract and sterile God of the deists. And it was in the name of the Supreme Being, and of the hypocritical virtue commanded by this Supreme Being, that Robespierre guillotined first the Hubertists, and then the very genius of the Revolution, Danton, in whose person he assassinated the Republic, thus preparing the way for the henceforth necessary triumph of the dictatorship of Bonaparte I. After this great triumph, the idealistic reaction sought and found servants less fanatical, less terrible, nearer to the diminished stature of the actual bourgeoisie. In France, Chateaubriand, Lamartine, and, shall I say it? Why not? All must be said if it is truth. Victor Hugo himself, the Democrat, the Republican, the quasi-socialist of today, and after them the whole melancholy and sentimental company of poor and pallid minds who, under the leadership of these masters, established the modern romantic school in Germany, the Schlegels, the Tiecks, the Navalis, the Werners, the Schellings, and so many others besides whose names do not even deserve to be recalled. The literature created by this school was the very reign of ghosts and phantoms. It could not stand the sunlight, the twilight alone permitted it to live. No more could it stand the brutal contact of the masses. It was the literature of the tender, delicate, distinguished souls aspiring to heaven and living on earth as if in spite of themselves. It had a